This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
Thank you for joining us today. We have Richard Fields in the middle, John Cameron down at the other end. All right, John, way to throw me off there at the first start of the game. But speaking of throwing things off, FBI searched the home of Project Veritas. Founder James O'Keefe. Thank you, there, Richard. You really did throw me for a loop there with those glasses, there, John. And they did a search on, and apparently it's over some diary, Joe Biden's daughter's diary, or something like that. I didn't actually read too much up on the story because I don't follow gossip. So what can you tell me about this?
It's one of those stories where who knows who's telling the truth. According to O'Keefe, his organization, Project Veritas, and we should background on Project Veritas. They are the people who do undercover videos, or surreptitious videos, making people look silly. They did one on Planned Parenthood, where they got Planned Parenthood people to be, utter very incriminating statements about their practices regarding abortion and so forth. But he does that sort of thing, particularly going after people on the left. So he's an independent journalist, but he's not part of the woke crowd, to say the least. He is, he works for conservatives, or he does conservative investigative journalism, essentially. And of course, he's not part of the mainstream media. So anyway, his organization was approached by somebody who claimed to have a diary that belonged to Joe Biden's daughter, and the diary supposedly had some information on it that was not particularly flattering to her father. Now, O'Keefe says that somebody came to him with the diary. They weren't able to verify from a third party that it was in fact a diary, so they declined to do anything with it. Another conservative organization, however, did publish the diary, and now started with the Trump administration. Barr Justice Department went after him, and now the Biden Justice Department is going after O'Keefe on what is a state level crime, the alleged burglary, theft of a diary. Now, and O'Keefe, of course, is saying they didn't steal anything. They were, at most presented with stolen goods, which they declined. But the question is whether or not the FBI, the Biden FBI, should be investigating a person who arguably was in the position to do an expose on the Biden administration, or the Biden candidate at the time, and declined to do so.
And it gets, my short answer to that, we can go on to the next topic. Next topic would be no. But I mean, if somebody else had a burgled diary that they didn't use and tried to give it back to the lawyer of the family that the burgled diary supposedly belonged to, I don't think the FBI would be involved. So, this is obviously, abuse of power at the federal level. Why the, attorney general for whatever it is, the FBI for that jurisdiction should be involved in. I wonder how many other burglaries they're investigating in New York. Second thing that's annoying about this, or maybe not annoying, kind of scary, depending on whether it was done for spin, and we'll find out later, or whether it was a leak out of the FBI, is that this was supposedly a secret warrant operation, and wasn't publicized or anything. But an hour after the warrant was served, a New York Times reporter called the people at Veritas and said, what do you have to say about this, FBI agents searching your premises? So, again, we have two different standards of conduct, and I'm not saying that the people on the right are any better than on the left, but with the certainly the deep state seems to protect those on the left much better than it does those on the right, with some exceptions. It's pretty obvious that the people in the highest office in this country are using what are supposed to be independent police organizations, i.e., the FBI, as their tools. So that's kind of worrying. I mean, if this show goes out in Sacramento, but it's seen all over the world, thank goodness. But Veritas did an expose on a Sacramento area teacher, so where they secretly filmed him pretending to be very progressive and woke parents, asking him, what he could do to, make their kid feel at home in their school. So, I mean, I think their tactics are pretty sleazy, no sleazier than the tactics on the left. But there's a whole lot of worrisome stuff going on in this, and I think it's worth people looking at it and following.
Yeah, the FBI are kind of rating investigative journalists, even if they're sleazy investigative journalists. Sleazy investigative journalists serve a purpose, do they not? I mean, did they not used to do this? They called it consumer journalism. Where they go out.
We used to have I can't remember his name, but we used to have a guy that was a fairly regular appearance, made a fairly regular appearance on Libertarian Counterpoint, who had a video camera, and his job, self-employed job, was to be an ambulance chaser. He'd chase ambulances, and he'd go to the scene of the crime or the scene of the accident or the scene of whatever excitement was going on, and get video and sell it to the local TV stations. The guy was how can I say this? He was an opportunist at best in what he did, but he was able to get news scoops where other people were not, simply because he was willing to chase the ambulance.
Yeah, and there's actually been a movie about a crew like that, an independent news crew that goes out and records events, and if you can get to the scene before local people get out, the local powers that we let be. That's my new phrase. Powers that we let be, not powers that be. Powers that we let be. Before the local powers that we let be cover it up, sweep it under the rug, all the rest of that. Yeah, you can find some interesting things, and whether it's sleazy or whatever. I mean, what the heck?
Well, John, we'll talk about some interesting sleazy things. Here's a topic for your heart. Police helicopter surveillance data was unsecurely stored and was released to and so of course the hackers found it and released it to the public. And it doesn't have just when they're over flying a crime scene or in a police chase. It literally has a bunch of people just hanging out in their backyards and their front yards, having a picnic, walking down the street, just average people doing average thing. This data is unsecurely stored. Now, what are these same groups of people who are now investigative journalists also have access to helicopter data, or now drones, with the future of drones, now that you can fly a drone, much cheaper to fly a drone than a helicopter,
and much less obtrusive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all the technology they have, like the Stingray. I didn't realize the Stingray thing, which is a police set up, in essence, a fake cell tower that signals go through. They don't even need to have a warrant to do that. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
And so, that to me, we're living in a police state, and it's we point our fingers at the Chinese and point our fingers at people in South America and all the rest of that stuff, and we have let the powers that we let be have way too much power, and we need to rein them in. But some of the things that came out in this story, I don't remember, I think it was a Wired story. That 1.8 terabytes, which is a trillion bytes, right? Trillion bytes, is that right, James? Yeah.
Oh, it's something like that. The actual numbers are weird.
And from 2019. So, and that was from primarily Dallas and Atlanta, two bastions of individual liberties, and this was just random stuff. Yes, they were, over crowds that formed during riots. They were at crime scenes, but there's video of people just randomly walking about. There's video of people in line at McDonald's. I mean, so, it could be very well that were part of, they were dispatched there because there was suspicious activity and the police asked for an eye in the sky. But if you're going to do that, then, and if it's part of an ongoing investigation, at least secure the data. And and get
a warrant. I mean, they probably just turn the camera on when the helicopter lifts off. They turn the camera on, don't turn it off until they land, and don't bother to secure whatever they've recorded.
Yeah, I live by the American River, and there's always somebody going missing or somebody having a problem in a raft or whatever, and I live close enough to what you would call a bad area of town. Well, I'm sure you have helicopter activity all the time in your neighborhood, James, because the bummer about it is that in areas where there's lots of people in color and low income areas, police helicopters basically are used to intimidate the populace by flying low overhead all day and night, and it happens, and it's just wrong. It's like driving a tank down the street. Oh, we're just driving the tank down the street. Yeah, what is the message that tank is sending as it goes down the street? You need to be aware because Big Brother's watching. But there's examples from years ago. I guess a helicopter was taking footage of and this will just, libertarians will love this. Apparently there was a group of people that got together for a kind of a midnight bicycle ride and didn't get a permit for it. So the helicopters flew overhead, this is in 2004, taking pictures of these people, I guess, so they could imprison them for bicycling without a permit. But they managed to capture 4 minutes of film of somebody with their really good infrared technology from 2004. It's much better nowadays, of people making love on the terrace of a penthouse. Why would anybody need to spend 4 minutes focusing their freaking camera on that? So it's invasive. It shouldn't happen. If they're going to use the stuff in relation to investigating a crime, what I want them to do is tag it to that crime. What I want them to do is get a warrant, or if because it's in hot pursuit, eliminate every before and after, secure it, and if it's not used in the pursuit of that crime within X date, this would be a nice law to have. Usually I say get rid of laws, then delete it. Delete the stuff. Because they obviously can't keep it safe, because 1.8 terabytes of it's now on the web.
Yeah. And yes, John, I do. I live right across from the med center down here. So we get we have so many helicopters around this neighborhood, we don't even notice them anymore. That's how many helicopters we get around here. And we also have open microphones, and the Stingray device gets constantly used in our neighborhood. We have issues with cell phone coverage around here because of the Stingray device. You can actually tell when your phone clicks over to the cell phone, to the Stingray device. And the sad thing is we just kind of accept it, because what else are you going to do?
Well, and you can't really move, because the same thing's going to happen wherever you move to. And you have the shot, isn't one of those shot towers, one of those microphones is supposedly to identify gunfire somewhere close to your neighborhood?
Yeah, they're all over my neighborhood, and they don't work. Yeah, they're just expensive piece of equipment for them to play with. But speaking of expensive pieces of equipment to play with, the media is all upset at a football player for lying, but that's not really what troubles me. What troubles me is that it's lying over his vaccination status, while they completely give Dr. Fauci a pass for his continued lying over masking and vaccination effectiveness, or even whether the recent dust up with Rand Paul over the NIH funding of gain of function research, which was blown up in the last couple of days.
The NIH stuff. I mean, that's the NIH dumping on Fauci. I mean, I think Fauci is going to be the sacrificial lamb for the establishment, because he has been essentially outed lying to Congress. No question about it. There's absolutely there's no gray in this. He defiantly and emphatically said the U.S. government under his direction was not funding gain-of-function research on bat virus at Wuhan. They were. The NIH has verified that they were, and he continues even now to lie about it. And then you've got the football player, and I don't follow football. I hadn't even heard of this football player until you guys brought this story to my attention. Somebody, Green Bay, I guess, quarterback said that I'm immune to the virus, but what he really meant, or he was playing, he was using sly language. What he really meant was that he had used some homeopathic remedy that he thinks makes him immune. And I'm not going to get into the debate of whether homeopathy or the vaccine or anything else is effective or not effective. But he was claiming something that was obviously not common parlance. When people say they have immunity, what they're really, in common parlance, that means, well, I either had the disease or I've been vaccinated, and he had not been vaccinated. But that's what he was leading people to believe by coming up with some sleight of hand language. And I salute the guy for not getting the vaccine. That's his choice, but he's trying to have it both ways. He's trying to be able to be quarterback and not get the vaccine. And the NFL is saying, you want to be quarterback, you got to get the vaccine. Now, whether the NFL is right, that's another question. Whether or not the vaccine mandates are correct and justified, another thing. But the quarterback was essentially trying to have it both ways by being sly with language.
Yeah, and that brings up
the woke crowd is mad at him, but not mad at Fauci.
Yeah, well, the woke crowd isn't mad at Fauci because Fauci was their darling for so long, and the reason they're mostly mad at Aaron Rodgers is because the minute this all broke, he said, "Yeah, now I'm going to be in the crosshairs of the woke crowd about this, and just got to come out and say, here's what I was doing, and here's why I did it." And he mentioned Joe Rogan as kind of a mentor. So everybody on the left despises Joe Rogan and thinks he's an idiot. And people on the right, some love him, some don't. And libertarians, those clear thinkers that we are, he says some amazingly good stuff. And then he says some amazingly entertaining stuff, and he's a showman, but in a lot of respects he's a good guy, and we can't discuss, unfortunately, dear viewers, we can't really discuss the ins and outs of the science, because if we don't agree with the deep state's position as it was the minute this show airs, then we get in trouble. Now, just because something that we say becomes the deep state's position a week from now, when they change their mind, as they often do, doesn't save us from being in trouble when we didn't follow whatever their whim was. But, there's so many ins and outs of this, but the reason that people are so upset is that basically, as Richard said, he lied. He lied in his choice of language. He said he had immunity. He doesn't have immunity even if the stuff he's taking works. What he has is some form of protection if he gets ill. I don't even, let me bring this up and see if you even want me to talk about it. One of the things that let me send it out for the next show, a recent Lancet article on the amount of blood shed by people who've been vaccinated and not vaccinated, and see if we want to even talk about it. So I'll stop right there. And we got lots of good stuff to go on. But, Fauci has had the bully pulpit, and what he said has affected the lives, the livelihoods, and the very lives of people in this country.
And around the world, by example.
Around the world, by example. Hopefully they're not following it. The rest of the world seems to be actually following the science, not what they call the science.
Unless you're in Australia or Austria or Germany.
Yeah. And this guy, Aaron Rodgers, his team is in the running to get a bye in the first round, and football is very important. So it's just crazy who we give credence and who we spend intellectual and emotional energy on in this country and who we completely ignore. It's insane.
That's what got me. It's that everybody's spend all this emotional energy getting upset with Aaron Rodgers, a football player, who's, whether he plays or not, it really is not going to change anybody's life unless you're maybe a Packers fan, right? Or maybe a Bears fan, and the Packers, you get happy because the Packers are terrible.
Or you're betting on the game.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Or bettors, and I don't care about bettors. So
it's a very small subset. Yes.
Yeah, but it's a small people whose lives will actually be altered by Aaron Rodgers lying to the public, but yet Fauci, who's lying to the public, at the very least destroys government credibility in this thing, and no one cares. That's the part that gets me. And it's, what do we do about it? I don't know, but it just,
we're putting a little sunshine on it, a little bit of transparency on it. That's the only thing that we can do while we can.
Yeah, well, there is a little bit of sunshine coming around, and a truck driver in New Jersey is on the verge of upsetting the second most powerful Democrat in the state. The Speaker of the House of New Jersey is currently losing by like 2,000 votes, even though I've just heard on a tweet that they just found some more votes somewhere or something. I don't know. This whole thing's begins all very weird. But even if he ends up losing, even if they go through hand counting and ballots, or we know how that goes, the fact that it was even close should be sending strong messages that people don't like politicians right now. I mean,
as well they should.
I mean, he spent $5,000 on his campaign. $5,000. He spent $153 on the primary. He spent about $5,000 on the normal election, and he's within a hair's breadth, if not of defeating the second most powerful person in New Jersey. That has to send an actual message.
And I think it sends a wonderful message well, first of all, he ran on a pretty simple platform. Basically, I think he's a truck driver, right?
Yeah.
And he ran on the platform that, aren't we getting tired of these rules that don't seem to make any sense? And we can't do our jobs, and we can't raise our families, and we can't send our kids to school, and they have to wear masks, and it's hard for me to do and if they put in this thing where all these people have to be vaccinated, we've already got not enough truck drivers, we're going to have even less, and this has got to stop. We just need things to be looser. I think he used the word looser, didn't he? If I remember correctly. And that's what libertarians have been fighting for since libertarianism became, whenever it became, which things need to be looser. And because people have seen the fallout from when we let these powers that we let be get away with all this crap, the tide is turning, and I think it's going to turn with a vengeance. I'm not saying I want Republicans to gain power, because, quite frankly, I don't see any difference between them and the Democrats. But this, spend until the economy collapses like a house of cards for no real reason other than you're buying votes, that's got to end. I mean, the voice of reason has to get there, and let's just have life a little looser.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. This guy was inspired to run for office the first time because he was not able to get a concealed carry permit. And this is in New Jersey. And New Jersey is not, it's not Texas. It's not a place where, gun rights are particularly popular, you wouldn't think. But, he's a truck driver. So he has, presumably, instances where having a concealed carry permit would be, life-saving. There's a potential for that to happen. And the sheriff told him, don't even bother. When the sheriff said, don't even bother, he got angry. And that's what inspired him to run for office in the first place. He ran for a couple of other offices before he finally decided to run for this particular position against the second most powerful person in the state of New Jersey. And it looks like he's, pretty good chance that he's going to win, unless they find some more, midnight delivered ballots, which is par for the course in places like New Jersey, but we'll see. But the guy is for all intents and purposes a grassroots libertarian from everything I've heard him say. Now, I could be proven wrong. He could be like all politicians once elected, start doing things that I do not approve of, but we'll see.
I agree. And that you brought up something, Rich. I know we got some other ground to cover. But the whole permit process, the Supreme Court's going to hear a pretty important case. They don't take Second Amendment cases, but they're going to take one. And if it goes the way the pundits think, then all of these barriers to self-carry around the country are going to get flushed down the toilet. I think there's only 18 states left that, is it 18 states that don't get in the way of people carrying concealed weapons, or is 18 states left that do get in the way?
I don't know the numbers, but there are a number of states where concealed carry is a shall issue as opposed to a may issue. New Jersey is obviously in the may issue. It's totally up to the whim of the local powers that be, the sheriff or whoever.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Supreme Courts and whims, real quick, the Fifth Circuit, I believe, put a temporary stay on the Biden vaccine mandates because of potentially grave constitutional issues. If I get the phrasing correct on that one.
Presumably, what the issue would be, I don't know. I haven't read the opinion or anything or what it actually says, but presumably the issue would be that OSHA doesn't have any power to be writing these kinds of rules.
Yeah, I guess the thing is that OSHA's mandate is workplace safety, and even though many people think the COVID is a huge threat, it's a threat to public safety everywhere. So because it's a threat to public safety everywhere, not just in the workplace, then OSHA has no mandate to act against something that is a threat to public safety. They have, if COVID only occurred in businesses with more than 100 people, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Then they could probably, based upon their mandate, do something about vaccination rules. But because the issue is
Universal.
It's pervasive, universal, then OSHA has no business fishing in that pond. That's the thinking, and that's what the attorneys are going to do. And, and unless the Supreme Court, it's the Fifth Circuit case, so they're going to appeal it to the Supreme Court. I guess they can't appeal it to the Fifth. And, if the Supreme Court decides to take it, they might just kick it back and say, no, that law works. And it'll be over. Or they might decide to take a look at it. It's going to be very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the interesting things on this is that the question, they're not actually asking the question we want. Well, I'll answer it is, does the government actually have the right to determine what goes inside and your body or not? I mean, I think that's the fundamental question. But there is hope on the horizon. I think 150 Libertarian candidates won in just Pennsylvania alone over the last election. And I think that's some good news.
And I think Spike Cohen, who has been instrumental in going out into the field and campaigning with all of these local candidates. Spike Cohen, of course, was the Libertarian vice presidential candidate in the 2020 election. Got to know Spike pretty well. He's a good guy. And he is doing libertarianism from the ground up in working with local grassroots candidates. And until the Libertarian Party is able to put together a group of people like Jeff Hewitt and like all of the people who won in Pennsylvania and elsewhere last Tuesday, and these are races like constable. Those are the people. These are basically an elected law enforcement official. They're people like auditors. That's all good news.
And we have got to see you next week. Thank you for joining us, and please remember to love everybody.
Well, thanks for letting me on the show. I really covered a lot of